Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's installment of the Talking TIM webinar series. My name is Kevin Vita, and I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, also known as NOCoE. As a quick reminder, if you don't know already, at NOCoE, we offer a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. Now I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. The presentation slides and a recording of this webinar will be available through the on-demand learning section of the NOCoE website. All of the attendees are on listen-only mode by default, but we'd like you to stay engaged by using the chat box for identifying yourself and your agency you represent, as well as any additional comments or questions you have during the presentations. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and we encourage you to enter in any questions you have during the presentations in the chat pod as they come to your mind at any time. The questions will be read aloud one at a time by the moderator, and our presenters will answer each question. So that's all I have, and with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator for today, Joe Tebow, to start us off.
My mute finger was stuck. Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to this month's Talking TIM webinar. Got a lot of really great information today. Before I get too far into it, I want to make sure I thank the good folks at NOCoE, Kevin and Adam, for establishing and letting us have this platform to communicate each month with you folks. So thanks to NOCoE. We're going to slide to today's agenda. Well, but first, once again, the disclaimer, right? And we don't endorse or any products that or labels that you might see in any of our presentations. But if it's best practice and that's what's being used, so be it. So it's out there. We're just not endorsing it. And there you go. Next slide. Hey, here's today's webinar at a glance. I'm going to cover a couple items here on electric vehicle fires and the research project that we have going on. And then I'm going to have my colleague, Jim Ostrich, who a lot of you folks know, is going to come on and give us the TIM responder, the training update, line of duty deaths. And he's also going to talk about Crash Responder Safety Week, which, I mean, it's almost July, right? So the planning stages are underway for that. So Jim's going to give us a good update on that. And a really good topic today we're focusing on, and we're going to have Chief Judy Dill give us a presentation on what her department and several other departments that she's engaged with are doing to enhance the safety of responders on the scene. Then we're also going to have a speaker that talks about retrofitting apparatus, or making use of the items that you already have and the amazing work that they do with retrofitting old apparatus into blocking vehicles. And then we'll have a Q&A session with those folks. And as questions pop in your head, please use the Q&A, or the chat gets a little bit busy, but there's a Q&A tab down at the bottom. If you don't mind, just pop it in there. And when the opportunity presents itself, we'll let you all ask questions, but we'll also keep an eye on the Q&A session there also. So with all that said, we'll have an audience listening session at the end, and we really need your input on this one, right? We're trying to lay the groundwork for upcoming Talking TIM webinars and topics. So we really appreciate you hanging on to almost the end of the webinar and participate in the listening sessions for policies, TIM policies and agreements. So with that, next slide. The next Talking TIM webinar, it's important, right? Wednesday, July 26th, we're going to feature emergency vehicle preemption, right? Which is part of the EDC 7. And have a great speaker on that. Also, traffic incident management for the managed lanes in Florida and what they're doing down there in District 5. And another audience listening session So next month, exciting stuff also coming up, and we appreciate you being here and take part in that, and sharing it with the folks around you, your sphere of influence, if you would, right? Invite them in, right? We need their input. Next slide. So there's been a lot of talk about this topic, and Federal Highway has launched the project to take a look at the issues surrounding electric vehicle fires and how it affects the TIM process and the TIM timeline. We're not getting into the fire suppression methods and tactics of suppressing the fire. That's out of our purview, but we are going to take a look at extended times, and we are taking a look at it with the experience that's being gained right now out there, which, it's trickling in, but the stream, the volume of that trickle is going to increase. So the purpose of the project was to take a look at the challenges associated with an extended electric vehicle fire on the roadway. And, we already have a historical background and foundation that knowing that a lot of these electric vehicle fires, when it involves the battery pan or the battery system, that it can be a very extended event in some cases and really tax your resources. We're looking at good practices, any policies that are out there, and being in the infancy, everyone's still trying to swim upstream on this one and figure it all out. But we know some folks have taken a stand, and we've discussed that a little bit in our couple of meetings that we've had so far. But the one meeting that we had with our subject matter expert panel that we put together, we're looking at the all the challenges, if you would, right? Because we tend to think, when we think electric vehicle fire right now, for most people, the first thing that pops in your mind is that passenger vehicle, just like you see on the screen there, a passenger vehicle side of the road or traveled roadway on fire. But it's a much bigger issue than just that, right? Because we're looking at electric commercial vehicles hitting the roadways, right? And they have massive battery pans and electrical source devices that are going to certainly, bigger batteries, bigger fires, longer time, more tax on the resource. But how does that affect TIM? And how's that filtered back? Are we prepared for that? And those are the things that we're looking at for this, and it may take us down a couple of other different roads as we progress. We've had some very candid and open discussions about the challenges around this, and remember, not all electric vehicle fires are thermal runaway fires, right? There are other things, just like a combustion engine vehicle that can catch fire and create an issue. So they're not all battery pan fires, but when we encounter one, the history already shows that it's quite the challenge, and the resources and the challenges faced by the urban departments are much different than those from the rural and remote. So, we have a lot of different issues to address through this project. And the subject matter expert panel we have represents all disciplines, all emergency response disciplines for TIM, and nationwide, rural, remote, urban. So, we've got a really good panel put together. So you'll hear more about this as we progress along. Any questions that you have, like I said, pop them in there. We'll try to address them, and we'll keep you updated on the progress of the EV Fires and TIM project. Next slide. With that, I'm going to introduce my colleague. Many of you know him, Jim Ostrich, who is going to give us the update on TIM responder training and Crash Responder Safety Week. He does great work, and I'm proud to be a part of his team. So, Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Joe. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Another good rally here. I see over 160 participants so far. Want to reiterate what Joe said, thanking the NOCoE and on behalf of Paul, Joe, Joe, and myself. Keep doing the great things that you're doing, ladies and gentlemen, because the nation is needs us and is relying on us to continue the fight for saving lives. So this initial slide, you can see where we are. It's just amazing. We're fast approaching 700,000 responders trained over the past 10 years. And as the two bullets over to the left show the progress between the last update, those are decent numbers. Those are very decent numbers, and we definitely have a ways to go. Remember, I always say we're actually closer to 2 million that we need to train, but you all are doing an incredible job. Next slide. So the line of duty deaths, we started off January, February, you may recall, with 0, the first time in several years. So we were on a rally there. This is still way too many fatalities. Talked to our great friend in Pennsylvania this morning, Todd Lease, with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, and he told me there's unfortunately a couple towers that have recently been struck. They're not part of the 16 fatalities, but they are in critical condition, and I just ask that that we pray for them and pray for all those that we've lost. Really, it's just very very sad, right? Very, very sad what's going on. So anyway, next slide. The train-to-trainer sessions, I kept this slide this time. You guys may or may not know, sometimes I don't show all the different slides that our great contractor team, Katie Belmore and Josie and others provide just for the sake of time, but it's worth mentioning that we're getting back in, on track with train-to-trainer sessions, both virtual and in person. Tomorrow's train-to-trainer, virtual train-to-trainer is full. So that's all right. You can still email Paul, Joe, or I if you want to be considered for the upcoming virtual sessions. And if you want to conduct a state-led train-to-trainer in your state, just send us a note. It's important that we keep refreshing our benches across all the states, because a lot of the trainers, the majority of the trainers have moved on or retired or whatever the case may be. We need more trainers constantly brought into the system. Next slide. Here are the numbers, both the in-person and the online numbers in parentheses. If you care to, reach out to us again regarding your specific training in your state. If you're someone new to the National TIM program, reach out to us and send us an email, ask questions, please. Next slide. This is the total responders trained per state. I know it's not a lot of time for you to really see what your numbers are, but I'm happy to say most states are still moving. As I said earlier, you'll see in a minute the actual breakdown. Next slide. This is the new strategic map showing the percentage of a state's responder population that has been trained. These numbers were established, the number in the parentheses, that is, the total number of all disciplines in that state to be trained and the percentage above it. This key down here to the lower right, you can see there are 20 states that are actually above 60%. And with 8 actually at 70%. We made adjustments to all the training numbers, the statistics from all the states that get reported. We adjusted those by discipline because we had some states that were based on the previous numbers had already reached 100%. But if you broke it down by disciplines, we were able to adjust the numbers down. And this goal of 60% in the upper left is the new goal. It was 55%. So we're doing good, but a long way to go. Here, down here on the lower left, the 1.3 million. Like I said, always remember, we're actually closer to 2 million that need to receive this training. Next slide. Here's the bar chart showing the different disciplines, the progress so far. And you can see, well, it's self-explanatory. Self-explanatory. Remember, in law enforcement, there's, state police, there's sheriffs, there's local police, county, so on and so forth. So law enforcement is lower because many have not been reached, to be honest with you. State police, highway patrols more so than local, and dare I say that is the same for fire, rescue, EMS, tow and recovery as well, and transportation, public works. Next slide. This is the slide with the breakdown. You can see all 50 states. Production, I guess. Next slide is the top 10. Kudos to these states. They're definitely trying harder, one could say. And we all should be doing the same thing. It shouldn't always be the same states that are the high performers. So Paul, Joe, and I and our contractor team, we do have some ideas how we're going to start helping the states. You've heard us talk about various initiatives, not only to train the trainers, but there's still a lot of opportunity. And I think most important is the communication, the dialogue with all the states individually, see how we can further support you. Next slide. The RSW, as Joe mentioned, is fast approaching, what, 5 months? And our team, Vishali and company, we recently held a meeting. Well, first of all, the date, take note of the date, November 13th to the 17th this year. Very similar to last year. There's some themes, a new theme, and themes for each day of the week. And it's a big deal because all our major associations in police, fire, rescue, EMS, towing, recovery, transportation and public works, and a number of others are part of this initiative. And we got to keep reaching the public for sure, and working with all our state DOTs and state public safety, tow and recovery stakeholders to get this word out. Next slide, you'll see here the activities. A lot of these are well known and repetitive, but they're most effective. I want to say number one, the governor's proclamations and/or mayor's proclamations. We've yet to have a mayor's proclamation, ladies and gentlemen. So if anybody has the ability or within their sphere of influence to make happen a mayor's proclamation, that would be awesome. But we definitely have governor's proclamations that have occurred over the past 2 years, and our goal this year is to reach 25 states or more with signed governor's proclamations. When Kevin hits the next slide, you see here, it highlighted these 5 that you see, or these 4, I should say, these 3, as key to activities that states should consider, have in the past, but definitely should consider. Mass trainings in particular as well, number 5, is something that obviously would be great. There are a number of states that have been doing mass training events, such as Arizona and Maryland, and a few other states. Number 8 and 9, you see there, public or mass media events are gaining some momentum as well. States like Pennsylvania and Virginia and others have put together some really great events at DOT facilities, as well as other facilities, as well as rest area messaging. Florida is, Virginia and Florida have been successful with rest area messaging. And dare I say, even gas station pumps, the filling station pumps down in Florida for a couple of years. New Jersey is another one. I missed saying that New Jersey does an awesome job promoting CRSW and everything having to do with move over laws, the training, line of duty desks, etc. But these are the things that we're going to be discussing here. You'll see in a minute. We need you to engage in especially for those proclamations this year. Our goal is to get to all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico. So that's well beyond the 25, right? Next slide, Kevin. I'll wrap this up here. The webinars, the all states webinars coming up here the second Wednesday of each month. Next one, that puts us at July 12th. Please share this webinar series information with your PIOs. And if you are someone that has the ability to influence CRSW activities, are close with your public information officer and your marketing team and have not engaged with us, please reach out to us. It's very important. I failed to mention the National Committee. That's what I started to say a few minutes ago, that we've already held one meeting with the CRSW National Committee that's comprised of leaders from the major associations. So with that, next slide. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Jim. Great job. We all agree that TIM training, right? It's the cornerstone. It's the foundation of keeping everyone safe out there. And Crash Responder Safety Week is our opportunity to educate the public, the motoring public, and public officials of how important it is. So it's all great stuff, and we look forward to your participation in it. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
On the screen are the innovations for our EDC7 technology for saving lives, and you see that the advanced warning technology is highlighted in yellow, and that's what we're focusing on today. And to do that, we have guest speaker with us, today. We have two actually. First up is going to be Chief Judy Thill. She's a third-generation firefighter with 35 years of fire service experience. She served as full-time chief officer for 25 years, volunteer paid on-call firefighter for 19 years, and managed employee safety programs and private companies. And she's been teaching TIM-related curriculum for more than 20 years of fire, EMS, law enforcement, utility workers across 2 states. She's from Minnesota, right? And she has a great presentation for us. Chief, I think we're ready, Kevin, for next slide. So Chief, take it away. We greatly appreciate you being here.
Well, first off, hello, everyone. I'd like to thank this group for having me here today to talk about using apparatus to protect responders and communicate with drivers. This is a subject that's very near and dear to me, and I just love talking about it. So hope I won't get too long-winded, but hopefully you'll get some good information out of it. Next. So we actually started this program in Minnesota back in close around 2002. I'll give you just a little bit of brief history of what we've done. We created a roadway safety program. We saw that the number of struck by incidents was climbing in just a short 5-year period from 1997 to 2002. We lost 3 firefighters, 1 state trooper, and 1 EMT on an ambulance service that were struck and killed while working the scene, so line of duty deaths. Minnesota, then MnDOT actually brought in responders from around the state and decided to have some roundtable discussions, which actually got pretty interesting back then because there was a lot of frustration, a lot of pointing fingers and so on. But when it was all said and done, law enforcement wanted to know why firefighters always brought out 2, 3, 4 different trucks and parked them all different directions to block the roadway down completely. And firefighters were always wondering, well, why do the state troopers or other law enforcement want to keep traffic moving when it seems so dangerous? So what we all decided at the end was that we were all out for the same end game, was the safety of the responders as well as the safety of the traveling public that were coming through and approaching our scenes. So we ended up coming to some kind of best practices on our own at that time. So right around that same time frame, there were 2 of us that put together training programs in what we called roadway safety at that time. And for one person that put together a program was John McClellan, who is now a MnDOT supervisor. And I put one together on my fire department. And we were out training basically in the same subject. So once we found that out, we decided to merge our 2 programs and start teaching as one. So we actually created an 8-hour, a 4-hour, a 3-hour, and a 2-hour program. And we took those on the road going throughout the state of Minnesota, and we've eventually gone into Wisconsin as well. Also in those early years, Brian Carey, who is a MnDOT engineer, was part of our training cadre that went out and did the training. In the next 7 years, we had 4 additional struck-bys along with some driving or some emergency driving fatalities. So we decided it was time to put together a video. And what we did, we had a collaboration of all responders as well, including tow operators and MnDOT, and put together a 30-minute video called Scene Safe. Due to time, I won't get into it. It is out on YouTube. If you want to take a look at it, it's a quick 30-minute video that talks about the highlights of TIM and the dangers that are out there and so on. And so that can be used as a supplement when somebody goes through TIM training, or as a reminder, or even if a small department just doesn't have a whole lot of time, it can be used to at least get the basics out there. Over the years, we've obviously added TIM components to our training, and now there's a movement going forward to try to get more emergency responders trained in Minnesota. So we hope to see our numbers climb that you saw on the map there. Next. So as you see in the video here, well, first off, it's my topic is using apparatus protect responders and communicate with drivers. I'll throw this out. Is this particular ladder truck doing anything to communicate with the approaching traffic that's coming up behind them? It's telling us that that particular lane is blocked. You can't move forward, obviously, but it's not really giving much for direction. And quite often people see when the lane's blocked that if there's an opening on both sides, they will utilize whichever side is the quickest for them to keep moving. So you'll see there's opening to the right and opening to the left. And while it's a shoulder to the right, people will still use the shoulder to go around. So you could possibly have drivers come around on the right side when you weren't expecting them. Next. So in this picture, at least it's a little cleaner which direction that you want your drivers to go. Yes, there's a shoulder on the right, but the angle kind of gives you a pretty good idea to probably most drivers. It might be, say, going around to the right, but for most drivers, they're going to go to the angle of the vehicle itself. And I'll just say this, since common sense doesn't grow in everybody's garden, there's always the potential that you're going to have somebody go around on the right. But again, most drivers will probably recognize this angle and which direction to go. Next. One of the things John, my training partner, and I talk about is that traffic is like flowing water, and it's always going to keep coming. So unless, like water, you dig a trench, or with traffic, you create a visible direction, it's going to find its own way through, around, or whatever. And we as responders aren't going to like what's going to happen when those drivers end up going in the direction they want to go versus the direction we want them to go. Next. So before I talk about what we've done as a department, I want to remind everyone of the basics. Just a simple slide here of apparatus angling, the direction you want the drivers to go. Not every fire department can afford adjuncts to add to their fire trucks, but we always take a fire truck to a scene, so we can always utilize that fire truck and angle it and give the population, the drivers coming up, a visual of which direction you'd like them to go. Next. One question, though, I often get is, how do we protect our pump operator? Because where's the pump on most trucks? It's right outside the driver's door on the driver's side. So if the pump needs to be used, the pump operator's out there working, obviously you can't put your truck in the direction that you really need traffic to go. So what else can we do? Next. So if you have another truck that you can bring out on scene, obviously you can place it behind the proper angle. But also I'd like to point out here too that cones or flares are good pieces of equipment that you can utilize to let drivers know and communicate with them what direction you want them to travel. Just remember, cones and flares are not meant to be force fields. They are meant to give you some kind of direction. I've seen quite a few times where cones are just placed flat across a lane of traffic, and we don't want that. We want to utilize the cones and flares to give drivers an angle, a direction where you want them to go. Next. So I know not every department has 2 trucks that they can bring out on scene, but maybe you have law enforcement on scene, maybe you have law enforcement, a fire chief on scene, and they can park like this, 2 smaller vehicles possibly, to create a taper, and again, utilize some cones or flares to get people at least around and through your scene if you have to angle your truck to protect your pump operator. Next. So there are other things we can use to better communicate with those drivers. What are some of the things that we have on our trucks? Next. A lot of trucks and a lot of emergency vehicles have light sticks on their vehicles. These can be effective, but If you have a lot of other emergency lights on around them, they actually get kind of drown out, and the drivers don't see the direction by utilizing the light stick. And also I found out when going to one of these safety training sessions, roadway safety training sessions, I was with engineer Brian Carey at the time. We found out that when you first turn the light stick on and people see it, they will react to it. But if the drivers didn't see you turn it on and they just approach it and see a light stick, to them it's just another flashing light. So you can use them, but they obviously are not ideal to be used in roadway situations. Next. So are there things out there that are better than a nightstick or light stick? Yep, there are. Next. We'll start with, again, kind of something more basic. Aero boards are fantastic pieces of equipment. Here's one mounted on the back of a ladder truck, and they've been mounted on all different types of trucks out there. Next. This is a Calgary fire truck. And as you see, just very basic aero. It's much better than a light stick because it gives the drivers direction that you want them to go. Next. Maybe you don't want to add it to a fire truck. You can put it on a utility vehicle, such as a van or a pickup truck or something like that. Next. And again, I know not everybody has unlimited resources, especially small volunteer fire departments, but here's a department went out, they got a signboard, an aero board donated, and they got a state surplus trailer and generator and put it all together, and they take this out on the scenes of the road, on the road. So again, very basic, didn't cost them a whole lot because everything was pretty much donated or low cost because it was government surplus. So just an idea out there. Next. Look around, see what your state Department of Transportation uses. This is MnDOT's Freeway Instant Response Safety Team truck, or FIRST truck as it's called. And there's many of these throughout the Twin Cities metro area. They have these boards that have the arrows as well as wording. And this is where we actually got our inspiration for our fire department. Next. So back in 2010, I wrote a grant, and we ended up ordering the same signboards that MnDOT uses. You'll see, if you look closely on these pictures, at the top of the back of each of these tenders, or tankers as some might call them, you see the light boards are installed on top, the signboards. So you can see too that one was mounted on a more square body and the other one was mounted on around what you might typically have as a water tender or a water tanker on fire department. Next. We have a control panel inside that raises and lowers the signboard, and then also turns the signboard on and off as well. I know they do, ours is wired. I know that they do have remote connections, but it's just going to depend on obviously cost and what you have available within your department. Next. So besides what you saw on the FIRST trucks, the MnDOT FIRST trucks, they have words. There's many different words combinations that are pre-programmed in, but you can also just use the control panel to create your own message depending on what it is. And maybe you don't need traffic to go in a specific direction, but you might need to just give them some information on, such as accident ahead or something like that as a warning. These boards are really great for that. So if you can afford something like this, I'd highly recommend it. Next. As you can see, they also have different types of arrows as well as the messaging out there. And arrows are a nice universal way to let people know which direction you want them to go. Next. So you'll see here a video of our signboard in action. And it's at a pretty interesting junction where we have an entrance ramp as well as the freeway. But you can see it takes several places of several vehicles or people on foot or whatever in a situation like this, because it is very obvious to the traffic coming up behind it on the entrance ramp to go around. But it's not as foolproof, because I don't know if you noticed, there was somebody that tried to sneak around on the right and got as far as just in front of the fire truck before the driver of the truck sounded its air horn, and she pulled over into the left lane in traffic, and then state trooper kindly pulled her over to the right. So, and had a little discussion with her. So again, can't rely on common sense, but it's actually very effective in these types of situations. Next. But we found out, I became the poster child of what happens when you have a drunk driver coming up. So even though this is a nice, big, very obvious signboard that was out there, this is our tender, one of the ones you saw in the picture there. Driver is coming up. We were merging this was in the left lane. We were merging traffic off to the right lane to go on to an exit ramp because there was a fatal accident up ahead. And the drunk driver was 0.26. So had quite a bit of alcohol in her, and she didn't quite make it over to the right lane. So it's interesting that, it's so obvious to others, but apparently when you're impaired, it's, obviously when you're impaired, it's not always going to register with you. Next. So our tender was totaled at that crash, and it took 18 months for its replacement. Just a little note I'll throw out. At that time, we found out there was no rental replacement insurance on our older trucks at that time. So it would have been a large sum of money to rent it as well as build a new one. So we actually, from our DNR fire service program, we got a loaner tender that we used for the next 18 months until the new one came in. Next. So here's a picture of our new pumper tender. You can see in the circle in the one picture on the top that the board's installed there. And you can see, even though it's forward of our hose bed, which is one question we always get too, we still have access to our hose bed, but it's still very visible from the back. So this particular sign was on the original tender that you just saw that was hit. While we were utilizing the loaner tender, we put it on an old rescue truck. And therefore, this has been on 3 different trucks, so 3 different ways of mounting it. Next. But again, that sign is not 100% effective, no matter how big it might be. And kind of leading into Chief Gonzalez's presentation, that if the light board was 100% effective, we wouldn't need the crash attenuators out there. So that's all I have for today. I thank you very much. And then next, any questions?
Yeah, Chief, thank you so much. And your questions, please pop them into the Q&A pod down there, and we'll be addressing them after Chief Gonzalez gets finished his presentation. But a lot of the things you talked about, Chief, Phil, is relatively simple to do, and the opportunities that lie in a lot of state surplus yards, right, can be used. You'd be surprised, what's put up for salvage sales that you could use and swing a deal. So, creativity and stepping out of the box to save lives, certainly worth it. Great presentation, Chief. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to bring up Chief John Gonzalez. Chief Gonzalez serves as a volunteer fire chief. He's also past district fire chief and deputy fire coordinator in Toms River, New Jersey. So he's currently employed as the operations director of Florian Re-Apparatus, which is a presentation he'll give us today, with more than 20 years experience in the insurance industry, and is also Pro Board certified in traffic incident management. So with that said, continuing on with the advanced morning, Chief. Greatly appreciate you being here, and you have the show.
Great, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for your time attending today. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what part of the country you're located. Thanks to Joe and the TIM program team for inviting me to do this presentation today, and the staff and everybody at NOCoE that makes this webinar possible. Today, I'm going to be discussing considerations and resources for fire departments and other emergency service agencies regarding the use of emergency vehicles in traffic management roles. Primarily, I'll be focusing on the use of emergency vehicles as physical barriers to protect incident scenes. My goal is to be both informative while stimulating creative thoughts that lead to discussion and ultimately action about challenging the norms to improve both responder and motorist safety. My contact information's at the bottom of this slide. At the end of the presentation, it'll appear again with a QR code that you can scan. So unlike Minnesota, where Chief Phil hails and was speaking of, in New Jersey, we are known to have some of the most attentive, respectful, and by far most patient motorists in the country. So we don't encourage as many as these kind of incidents. I jest. So I do remain active as a volunteer firefighter in Township, New Jersey. And in my experience, the concept of traffic incident management wasn't widely discussed back when I joined the fire service in the early 90s. In my response area, we would respond onto the Garden State Parkway and had a lot of experience regarding lane closures that were permitted or not permitted. One of the most dangerous things that we do as firefighters is respond to roadway incidents. In my opinion, this presents our most frequent and serious risk of death or serious injury as emergency responders. I would argue that we're in greater jeopardy while working on high-speed roadways than responding to structural fires, which is a job that we constantly train and prepare for by studying topics like building construction, fire behavior, the art of reading smoke. One of the many inspirational sayings in the fire service is you can't train too much for a job that can kill you. Do we put the same effort and emphasis into roadway responses and safety? Sadly, there are far too many incidents of emergency responders being killed or seriously injured while working at roadway incidents. Next. While I suspect that most of the attendees on this webinar are all too familiar with these stats, and they were discussed earlier today, I don't think we can ever overemphasize the impact that these numbers really have to families, friends. Recently, I had the opportunity to participate in a 3-day Move Over and Distracted Driving conference in Maryland, hosted by the Eastern Transportation Coalition. As part of that program, there was a session where family members of struck by victims told their stories and how their lives had been impacted. There were also 2 law enforcement officers that spoke that were survivors of serious struck by incidents. They shared their stories about how they sustained life-altering injuries. As mentioned earlier, these statistics that are on the screen don't reflect the number of those responders that may have technically survived, however, permanently lost their way of life as they knew it. Next. So in total, since 2019, there's been 222 emergency responders that have lost their life as a result of struck by incidents. In the fire service, National Fallen Firefighters Foundation has a program, Everyone Goes Home. So if we think about that, 222 times in the past 4 years, everyone didn't go home because they were struck at a roadway incident. Next. So we focus a lot of attention on the emergency responders that are killed, as well we should. Their big topic of phrase in the industry is the D driver: distracted, drunk, drowsy, drugged, disrespectful, dangerous, dumb, and many new Ds can be added every single day. While we know about the D drivers and we look at the D driver as our enemy, as the result of their actions, we know that these D drivers pose a great threat to us. But our role in emergency service is to protect everyone. This also applies to that D driver and the potentially innocent occupants in their vehicles or other vehicles on the roadway. While we place great emphasis on protecting responders and the initial incident victims, I think it's fair to ask the question, are we doing our best in utilizing all the appropriate resources and equipment to protect everyone on the roads? Recent studies have suggested that the intensity and flash patterns of some of our emergency vehicle lightings can contribute to the problem and cause confusion. Perhaps even the retro reflectivity levels of the chevron striping that we use can add to that problem. So the list of incidents that you see on the screen are incidents that I personally found during research over the past couple of years where civilians were killed as a result of striking a stationary fire truck while operating the scene of some type of roadway incident. The last incident on this slide from Contra Costa County in California has received a lot of attention in this past April because that involved a Tesla that was believed to be on autopilot that crashed into the tiller truck that was blocking on I-680 in Walnut Creek, California. So while autonomous or semi-autonomous vehicles and the risks they pose as a topic of its own, I did just see this past week on the Pennsylvania Turnpike that a Tesla on autopilot struck a work truck that was doing a lane closure. Fortunately, my understanding is nobody was injured during that event, but it's another risk that's out there beyond the D driver. It's the non-driver. Next. So response on high-speed roadways. Think about your jurisdiction that you're most familiar with. Incidents like the ones seen on the screen occur all times of day and night, every day across the country, in different weather conditions, different traffic conditions. What does an emergency response in your area entail? What type of resources from what kind of agencies are going to respond to something like this? Obviously, you're going to have fire, police, towing, maybe EMS, DOT, the Safety Service Patrol. So many of our TIM procedures across the country and best practices would include the use of fire apparatus for the purpose of blocking the travel lanes at the incident or the additional adjacent lane +1. Many fire departments would dispatch additional frontline fire trucks solely to handle the task of blocking because of their size and weight. While I would never argue against protecting a responder working in initial incident with whatever resource is available at any given time, I do question if we continue to put the fire department's most expensive and most valuable apparatus at great risk unnecessarily when there are other resources and options. I commend the many departments that have tackled this issue, and as you heard in Chief Thill's presentation before, that have partnered with other agencies to bring awareness or implemented some type of blocker vehicle program or used enhanced warning devices to better provide better direction to motorists. We do know that our frontline fire apparatus, for the most part, when it comes from the factory, is not designed to provide effective traffic control. Next. So our goal is to use the right equipment for the job at hand. So we try to advocate for improving safety at the responder motorist interface. The key components of a well-built blocker vehicle is that it has a MASH tested rated attenuator, a TMA, it stands for truck mounted attenuator, a full-size DOT compliant arrow and/or variable message board to improve direction to the approaching motorists. Both the TMA and the arrow board should be fully deployable and stowable from within the cab, so you don't have to put personnel out in traffic to either deploy or stow it. I firmly believe that digital alerting technology should be included in every blocker vehicles. The latest technology sends alerts through vehicle infotainment systems and popular map programs that alert motorists that they are approaching an emergency vehicle. While the blocker truck is put in place for protection for those times when the D drivers don't actually move over, I believe the most efficient blocker trucks can help prevent the secondary incident from ever occurring. Your properly equipped blocker truck should also have a camera system with DVR, so any secondary impacts would be documented and recorded for any proceedings that might happen later down the road. Next. Okay, so building TMAs on a fire truck chassis. Many would ask, why would a department retrofit an aging piece of apparatus into a TMA? So over the past several years, the costs for new fire apparatus has risen significantly, to put it mildly. Build times now are a period of years. They've up to 40 months plus sometimes. Could you afford to lose one of your primary pieces of fire apparatus and then have to wait 40 months to have it replaced? Over the past several years, frontline vehicles have sustained millions of dollars in damage as a result of being struck while operating at roadway scenes. Look how often we see the social media posts of a struck by incident, where there might not be injury, but look at the damage to the apparatus that's happening daily. And as I had mentioned before, most of your frontline fire apparatus isn't designed to provide quality traffic control, because that was never really the intended job of the fire department, right? Fire trucks are meant to be used for fire suppression. New TMA trucks are also are costly, not anywhere near the cost of a new fire apparatus, but it's a lot more cost effective if you have a good quality fire truck chassis that you can convert into a TMA with the same brand new safety equipment that you would find on a brand new TMA. Also, with your new TMAs, right now, a brand new commercial chassis is hard to get a hold of in a timely manner with the supply chain issues that we faced. So on the two units that you see on the screen here, we removed the fire bodies and the pumps, installed a custom-built flatbed that has the required ballast weight built into the flatbed. So any type of racks or cages for cone and barrel storage can be installed, and the entire flatbed is usable. Next. On the below truck, we've left the fire body and pump on. We've installed the attenuator through the rear compartment, doing a frame extension, and the arrow board is forward of where the attenuator folds in the stowed position so that it can be, that's out of the way and can be easily deployed from within the cab. Depending on the brand and model of the attenuator that you use, this option would work for a reserve piece of apparatus. There's a quick mounting system that one of these attenuators could be installed where the unit itself could be removed in a very reasonable time by just a few people without any heavy equipment. And your engine in this case could be placed back in firefighting service within less than an hour or two time. Next. So finally, as I close here, community risk reduction is a very hot topic in the fire service and receives a lot of attention today. Initially, CRR was designed and focused around fire prevention efforts. But as the CRR programs expand across the country, traffic incident management has started to be discussed as part of CRR. And it makes sense if you think about it in terms of the five E's of CRR. We have first, emergency response, talks about mitigation strategies, utilizing the appropriate and specialized equipment, the training of responders, the appropriate staffing, and efficient use of available resources. Education was discussed earlier. The focus that's being put on TIM training is incredibly valuable. Enforcement, we talk more and more about the move over laws and actual enforcement numbers in the move over laws. Economic incentive, it can either be positive or negative. So I've dealt with departments that have sustained significant economic impact in a negative way because of apparatus that have been struck. And it can also be positive if you think about how you're mitigating your risk by using a piece of apparatus that you've already paid for and could get very little in for return at the end of its life cycle. By investing a little bit of money into it to turn it into a blocker, you're potentially you're mitigating the risk of using a truck that might cost $1.5 million in today's market. Next. Okay. That's my contact information. I'm available if anybody needs to contact me or would like to discuss any of this. The QR code is a live code that has all of my contact information and our company social sites on it. Thank you.
Outstanding. Hey, John, keep camera on for a second. A great presentation. Outstanding points also, especially when it comes to the trickle down effect of losing a piece of critical fire apparatus. It trickles down into the community, and the replacement for that can be a real headache. And there's more than one way, right, of accomplishing the goal and thinking out of the box. And a lot of the apparatus that you built is in use out there today. Chief Dill, you bring your camera up. I think we got a couple of questions here, and the first one, Chief Dill, I'll toss it to you because during your presentation you had mentioned that you would utilize a grant, right, to get something, and we've got a question as what type of grant and that you used out there to purchase.
Sure. The grant we used was the Assistance to Firefighter grant program known as the AFG. If you're in the fire service, it's a federal grant program. It's very competitive, but anybody that wants to take my narrative, it might not be specific to yours. I'm happy to give that to you. If you've never applied for one of those grants, I'm happy to walk a fire department through it. They just closed the grant process, so it won't be for a few months. There's some hoops that you have to jump through to get registered to apply for a federal grant, but it is a possibility out there. And then depending on the size of your department, I know we had ours, we had to pay 10%. And I think there might even be for a smaller department, might have to be, they might have to pay 5% of the total amount.
Outstanding. Yeah. There was another question there, and there was also a comment. Looks like some folks have also used the Assistance to Firefighters grants. Chief Gonzalez, how about you? In the departments that you've worked with for your blocker units, how are they staffing? How are they operating? What have you seen out there? You know, career departments versus volunteer departments versus fire police, right? Let's not forget about the fire police, right? That provide a critical service out there for traffic management. But what have you seen out there?
So fire police, for departments that have fire police, it's the perfect unit for them to bring to a scene, deploy at a scene. I have departments that do that. For a career department or a department that doesn't have fire police, I've had familiar with departments that take a member from the initial crew that's responding to the actual to the incident, and that crew member would bring the blocker truck. They'd respond in tandem to the scene, set the block, and then that driver operator of the blocker rejoins the crew from the initial piece of apparatus that was respond and performs normal firefighting, fire rescue functions. Also, some chiefs have told me that, and this depends totally on your labor situations, but that they can use light duty people on OGI or light duty to be operators on the blocker units.
Getting creative, right? Getting creative, and we do know that there's also a couple of agencies out there that it's simply staffed 24/7 with one individual, you know, and that's just like you might have a tanker / tender, right, in the station. That's one person operation, driver, 24/7. You know, you can get creative, but you know that's a going to be a regional departmental kind of thing. But there are more than one ways of making it happen. And you know, today's fire apparatus right now is being used because it's there, it's big, and it's heavy, but it's not always the ideal piece to use. So you folks are definitely getting out of the box on this one and making it happen. So Chief Dill, when you did your message boards and light boards, was that a combined effort between you and maybe DOT shops, or did you do it in your own shop, or who actually did that plus the wiring for you?
Our maintenance shop in our city actually is the one that installed it and did all the wiring for us. Thinking back that far, I think we had some help from the representative that sold us the boards. And I'm not sure whether any of our shop guys went and talked to anybody at the MnDOT garage or anything like that. But since our shop guys were most familiar with our trucks and worked on our trucks all the time, they were the best ones to install it. They did have to get creative with the round tank versus the square tank and so on, because obviously the framing is set up more for a square body on a truck, but they were able to make it work on the one with the round tank.
Outstanding.
And that one is still in service too, the one with the round tank.
Well, very good. Very good. Yeah, that makes good sense because they're familiar with the vehicle, and it's an in-service vehicle, and it's got a wiring kind of spider web kind of wiring issues in there. So yeah, it's best to have somebody who's familiar with it, so that they can make that happen. So yeah, hey folks, you know, that's great information. Thanks for sharing it with us. And yeah, the advanced warning, right? Because the traffic incident management saves lives every day, right? And we're learning that there are numerous ways, right, of making that happen, keeping our folks safe. It's all about safety, right? And we always have to prepare for the strike, right? And in the motorcycle world, we always said, dress for the slide, not for the ride, right? That be prepared, right? Be prepared for the possibility. And we should really start thinking that way, you know, when the fire scene also, just prepare ourselves, because it could happen at any second. So, you know, you folks did a fantastic job. I greatly appreciate the time we have. And folks, look, if you still have questions, you know, pop them on in there in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get them answered for you. But thanks again. Hey, Kevin, I think it's time to move on to the next session. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chief. Greatly
Bye,
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Thank you.
Hey, it's the audience listening session, right? And we're focusing on the TIM policies and agreements. And I'll let me expand on that a little bit more next, please. When I mention policies and agreements, right, for TIM, right, specifically traffic incident management, we're curious to see what all is being used out there, or maybe what's the primary use out there, because there are the policies and there are the agreements, and you can see the difference here. And we're going to pop up a couple of poll questions for you, but to lay the foundation, I'd like to get the first poll question popped up there, so we can lay the foundation of what discipline are you associated with. Give you a couple of seconds there to go ahead and select. And while you're doing that, we're looking at the, you know, when we talk about TIM policies, you see, you know, there's a couple of bulleted items there, if you would, and the open roads policy, clearance times, and setting certain criteria or goals or benchmarks to get the roads open, even down to, you know, steer it and clear it kind of thing, where, you know, if you can move it, get it off the traveled roadway, you know, the messages that are out there for the traveling public, and then there's the shared data. Right. Once again, it's, you know, incident and roadway clearance times and response times, and you know, the information and the amount of data that's out there, is it being shared amongst the response community, right? Our group of crash responders, including towing and recovery and safety service patrols and all the players, right? So I'm not able to see the status of the poll, but with that said, let's clear that one off, and I'll continue on. Right, the MEs, medical examiners, right, and fatality removal. There are policies out there that require, you know, response within a certain amount of time. Oh, there we go. There's the response that we were looking for. Yeah, good. That's good stuff. Right, great stuff. So we know we can kind of gauge, right, some of the rest of the responses there. So great, that's fantastic. The joint operations or unified command, or you know, the policies that have established who's going to come, when they come, how they come, right? The different operations amongst our unified group of responders. And then there's towing and recovery. You know, it's listed as towing and recovery incentive, and there are incentive programs that, by policy of typically the DOT, right, in the contract writing and the contract language, that you know there are incentives for response times and roadway clearance times for towing and recovery. It's an actual policy, right? And then of course we know mutual aid. There are mutual aid policies, and there are even mutual aid agreements, right, that are out there. But when we look in the other column versus the agreement, TIM agreements, right, we've got the handshake agreement, right, where one discipline agrees to help the next, or one county or state for that matter agrees to help the next. And then there's MOUs, or memorandums of understanding, that clearly state that we will provide assistance when requested, what type of assistance. The interagency agreements, once again, it's all about, when you call us, what can we provide for you? When will we do it? How will we do it? And by what means, right, will we do it? And that could involve 911 public service contact points and other types of, or the TMCs, and how we do it. And then there's the intergovernmental, right, which, state versus county versus city, types of agreements of the mutual aid, and operational, and that is the boots on the ground type of agreements, and to that level, right? And funding agreements, right? There we talked a little bit about funding, what's available out there, but it goes a little bit more than that, because there's funding for hazmat recovery, resource recovery, but are there agreements for resource cost recovery between agencies or groups? And then there's a master agreement that umbrellas the strategic highway safety plan, if you would, umbrellas all of these things combined, maybe. So poll question number 2, if we can pop that one up. So select all TIM policies that you're familiar with, and we'll give you a few seconds to do that, as we're collecting this information, because we feel like we want and we need to build a future Talking TIM program webinar to discuss the options out there, because even today, right, there are folks that are struggling to accomplish their agreement, or they have an agreement that they want to become policy. And we know a lot of you folks out there have maybe already cleared that hurdle, and we certainly like to utilize that information as we prepare a next informational or a future informational Talking TIM session. So as soon as I think we have that information collected and the results of that, oh, there you go, right? So, there's a multitude of popular stuff out there, right? When we're talking policies, remember this was policies, so there's a lot of policy out there, 76% for open roads, some type of open roads policy. And then sharing data is big, so you can see the results out there. We appreciate that. So that can serve to steer us in the right direction. But we're going to also do the other column now, right, with the poll question number 3, and that's going to deal with the agreements portion of it. So how many of you select the TIM agreement that you're most familiar with? And you can choose multiple. Give a few seconds to build that and the results to that. While we're talking that, I'm just glanced over to the chat, and there's a message in there that this past weekend, Massachusetts, 2 Massachusetts state police cruisers and a tow truck were struck in a 24-hour period, right? And it's traffic incident management, watching out and trying to protect ourselves from those D drivers. So yeah, it continues, and it's extremely unfortunate that we still have folks that are penetrating our safety zones and destroying lives and destroying millions of dollars worth of very critical equipment. So let's take a look at those results if they're in. MOUs and interagency seem to lead the way there. handshakes, not too far behind. Some, a lot of them are good as gold, right? Good as gold, right? So yeah. So we kind of have a smorgasbord, right, of different types of agreements out there, and also policies portion of it. So I think that's a good compass for us. I'm not sure if my colleague Paul Joden or Jim Ostrich have any thoughts on that part of it, but it certainly gives us that build to plan for an informational Talking TIM in the future to talk about the variety of programs that are out there. And once again, that striking that conversation leads to peer-to-peer conversations and helps everyone out, because we start exchanging ideas and methods of accomplishing what others have already accomplished, and the hurdle that you're trying to get over makes it a lot easier, or somewhat easier, right, to get past that hurdle. So that's great. I'm looking to see if we have any additional. So yeah, there are a couple of questions there. I don't mean to switch gears too much, but I want to make sure these questions get answered here. And Chief, let's see, the retrofits. So Chief Gonzalez, are these blocker vehicles dispatched on the original assignment, or is it a special call as they roll?
That would depend on department protocol. The departments set that up the way that that they see best fit to use the resource. A lot of the departments that I talk to, it's an automatic dispatch on certain roadway, interstates, limited access highways, roads with speed limits of more than 45 miles an hour, something like that.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that initial dispatch is something else we should look at closer, because believe it or not, a lot of departments don't don't dispatch a heavy piece of apparatus on the initial call. Oftentimes EMS is the first vehicle there, and we know they have limited blocking abilities when they're the first one on the scene. So yeah, to talk about automatic dispatch of some type of heavy piece of apparatus, and especially a blocker if it's available, is a discussion to have. Yeah, for sure.
There are many departments out there that dispatch the fire department for the sole purpose of blocking at some type of an EMS call, or just an accident without injuries. The fire department's actually assigned to go out onto the highways and block.
Yeah, absolutely they are. That's a fact here in Baltimore County where I am. So you get a heavy piece along with whatever else is coming, right? So yeah, that's the way we do it right out of the gate, right? Because we know the first 15 minutes or so of the crash scene is usually the most dangerous, right? We know that by the reports that of the incidents that have happened, and so you want to get it out there early, get it out there as quick as you can. And I, when I say that, I also have to qualify that with, a lot of us on this call, a lot of us have the luxury of rapid response times to the scene. But I like to take every opportunity to remind those folks that, out in rural and remote communities, they can have up to a 60-minute response time to their first due area. So it's very critical to get it on the road early, into the event, or else folks might be out there for a while with minimal protection. So we have to keep that in mind too. And Chief Gonzalez, one other question, just not to put you on the spot, but generally speaking, what's the cost of an outfitted blocking apparatus? Call it.
So general rough numbers, depending on what you want to do, and there's so much customization when it comes to the storage of different traffic safety equipment that you want. But a base unit costs roughly $60,000 to $70,000 to convert.
and that's we supply the apparatus itself.
That's without the chassis. So you supply a chassis that's a brand new MASH rated attenuator, the brand new DOT compliant 4x8 arrow board, that's a DVR camera system, and that's 5 years of HOS alert, digital alerting, safety cloud included.
Yeah. Okay. There you go, folks. Right. And yeah, govdeals.com, right? There's apparatus out there that can be converted, but of course you also want to make sure that it's DOT compliant, safety wise, and the other issues that come along with it. But it's much cheaper, than a $1.2, $1.5 million engine or truck company that's been smashed to bits out on the roadway. So. Hey, Paul, I see you popped your camera on.
You wouldn't want to get to a Talking TIM webinar without me saying something, right? For those who don't know me, I'm the third member that you haven't heard from of the Federal Highway TIM team. But, just a couple of things, Joe, really quick. For what I heard from that cost from Chief Gonzalez, can we afford not to? So some of the things we've been hearing at the national level is that the fire community is raising the alarm about their vehicles getting struck and being taken out of service 4 years to replace a vehicle. So now the fire vehicles can't respond to what they were built for in the first place, other emergencies. So, it's almost like we can't afford not to do it. It's just finding out that creativity that we need. Also, Chief Gonzalez, Chief Still did a great job as well. But Chief Gonzalez mentioned something that we don't think about too often, Joe and Jim, is the civilian fatalities that maybe we want to shed a light on that. I did, all these years I've been doing it, I never thought of that we should maybe think about these civilian fatalities that are running into these vehicles and how we may be able to use that to leverage and get folks' attention. But then just the last thing I'll say is that question and answer session on the policies and agreements that we decided to have today. That's because Joe, Jim, and I, and Federal Highway, and some of the other folks that are supporting us think we need to revisit some of the foundations, as Joe put it earlier today, of a solid traffic incident management program. Many of us are familiar with those, but some of us are not. And and we would like you and recommend that you, as a TIM practitioner and champion, maybe revisit and take a look and see what policies and agreements are in place that folks may not be aware of. So that's all I had, my 2 cents. At least for now. So
good points, Paul. Yeah, that the civilian fatality part. Yeah, you're right. That you're spot on, right? Because it's we wipe our forehead and go, shoo, none of our crew got hurt when that vehicle comes smashing in here. However, the driver of the vehicle may very well have succumbed to that crash. So yeah, there's two sides to that fatality story for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Maybe part of our business case moving forward as we try to fire up some support for funding and that and other types of support. So
absolutely. Well, I think we're just about at the time mark, right? Anything from Jim? You have any closing remarks or any comments to jump in?
Thanks, Joe. To Paul's point, we heard from a medical examiner in Texas. To Paul's point about civilians, it's a statistic it's got to be horrendous as well. In Texas, a medical examiner reported 22 a year. Civilians being struck and killed on the side of the road, changing a tire, doing whatever. But Paul's absolutely right. And so fantastic presentations from Chief Thill and Chief Gonzalez. We had well over 100 folks stay with us for the entire webinar. So kudos to everyone, and Joe, good job.
Yeah, Chief Dill, Chief Gonzalez, greatly appreciate your time. NOCoE folks, greatly appreciate your help and hospitality. There's our contact information. If you need to get hold of any of the three of us, please reach out to us. We appreciate everything you do, and we need you and your circle of influence, right, to keep this moving. So thanks so much for joining us. Come see us again next month and bring a friend, right? Right. Let's build the community. So greatly appreciate it all. Thanks, everybody. And that'll be it for us today. Thanks for coming.